ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the show. I'm glad to have you guys here. Now, listen, today is Sunday. It's Sunday, the 23rd of February, 2020. And you know what? This world, going all the way back into history, if you studied the ice ages we have, if you studied the upheaval that we have on a periodical basis, on a cyclical basis, there's an upheaval that occurs on the earth. Probably in a cycle of about every 12,000 years. And, the Mayans knew all about this. They recorded this upheaval as a sun. They called it a sun because what would happen is the earth would actually shift a little bit, and the sun would rise in a different place in the sky after the cataclysm ended, and finally they could see the sun again. But it was like maybe 2 or 3 years they wouldn't see the sun during the cataclysm. And the poles will move. And so the sun would rise and set in a different spot, so it would be a new sun, what they'd call a new sun. Well, actually, it's not a new sun, technically. It's the same old sun, but it rises in a new position and sets in a different position because the earth actually moves. This is called crustal displacement, when the earth actually moves a little bit. And the actual, not the magnetic North Pole and South Pole, but the actual North and South Pole actually moves a little bit, maybe 1,000 miles each time, and then it resets. The earth resets and goes. But that's not the only cataclysm that occurs on the earth. There's volcanic cataclysms. There's meteors and rocks from space that cause cataclysms. Then we have potential diseases and we have to work with that cause potentially cataclysmic effects. The earth is constantly undergoing one sort of a crisis to another on this planet. And this is the normal scheme of things. About every 20 years or so, the earth has a monumental-sized crisis. Well, we've went through a dry period now. This lasted about 100 years or so, basically, except with the exception of the Great Depression, and world wars. We've been, especially since the end of World War II, we've went through a very calm period. This lasted for quite a long time, and this is not the norm. This is the exception. It was a good run, guys. It was a good run, and honest to goodness, I've lived all my life in this period, the baby boomer generation, and some of you are younger, but even if you're only 20 years old right now, you grew up in the good times, the fat times, the rich times, the wonderful times we've all had, from monetary expansion to the sky and back, and cheap and easy money, and it's just been an absolute utopic type of period where, especially if you're old enough to remember back in the late 1960s and in the 70s, how good life was in the United States of America. It was absolutely, just watch the film American Graffiti to give you an idea of what life was like. It was absolutely something else. We lived through these periods, but what we're facing now in the next couple years is going to be such monumental changes that looking back forward in history, we will see that the old period, like that period, the baby boomer generation period that started like at the end of World War II and led up to where we are today, we'll see that period was kind of like looking at a bubble, or you ever seen one of those glass things that you shake it and the snow falls inside the glass, and there might be a little house in there and a little Santa Claus or whatever. It's kind of like we're sealed in that period right now, and this is the very close of it. We're moving on into something new. We're going to progress into something new after these crises have ended. And I explained them in my show yesterday, or the day before that I did, about two trains colliding. Well, you know, two trains will collide, and there'll be a big loud bang, and parts and pieces fly all over the ground, but eventually the noise ends and cleaning up the mess begins. And it'll be the same with this, you know. I don't know exactly how it's going to conclude, but we're going to have to there's so many parts and pieces to all of this that anybody that says that they know exactly how it's all going to pan out doesn't know what in the heck they're talking about. So we're heading into a monumental crisis. What I'm expecting is, I'm expecting the stock markets and the markets to start to react to this in the next couple weeks. They're already starting to react, but I mean, I'm talking about substantial reactions, you know. And, you know, all of this is going to generate an awful lot of fear in the communities all around the world. Every country on earth is going to have an awful lot of fear. And people have different ways of handling fear. Fear has two basic reactions in humanity. One is to paralyze you, right? It can paralyze you with fear. You can become paralyzed with fear. Or it can also act as a motivating force, a tremendously powerful motivating force. And what you're going to find is the survivors, at first they might be a little bit paralyzed. It might last a day or two, 3 days maybe 4 days. It might take them a while to get their head around it. And they might be paralyzed with fear. But what a survivor will do is, after they get over that initial period of shock and paralyzed from the fear, what they'll do is they'll start transforming. And they'll start transforming that fear into action to preserve themselves. This is a survival instinct, you know? And they'll transform that fear and they'll use it as a motivating tool to engage into actions that they'll take to try to not suppress the fear, but to try to deal or cope with the situation at hand so that they can survive. And this is the reaction that survivors have, and this is the reaction that you have to build in yourself if you want to be a survivor, is you have to, it's okay to take a couple days to deal with it in your mind and come to an understanding and be paralyzed with that fear. But don't let that fear extend out further than that. Don't let it overwhelm your life and make it so that you can't respond to the situations at hand that you need to respond to in order to survive. You got to transform that fear into vital energy so that you can accomplish the tasks at hand that you need to accomplish in order to survive in a situation. And we don't know what kind of situations are going to come at us. This whole thing that's beginning, involving the markets completely and utterly crashing to the ground, I personally believe, and it's my own belief, that what we're actually going to see in this is they're going to have to close the markets, ultimately. I think they're going to have to close them. Shut them down for a period of time. Possibly all the markets. And so if your money's all locked into the markets, you're not going to be able to move it in or out or anything if that happens. It's going to be a big job to keep systems up and running. Just in time, supply chains and everything else. It's going to take a lot of logistical solutions that'll have to be put in place on the spur of the moment in order to keep the logistics involved, in order to keep things up and running. And the men responsible for this, let's hope that they're not the kind of man that shrinks back in fear and turns into a crying, sniveling little baby because they're so scared. Because like I said, fear can have more than one way. It can paralyze you. So let's hope that they're the type of men that are able to absorb that into their mind and able to to come to an understanding, and then able to transform that negative energy that would paralyze them into positive energy so that they can move forward with the task at hand. We need that kind of a man in place to handle this kind of situation. That's the kind of men that we need in place to handle this situation, or women. Now, I don't want to, I'm going to say men and women. We need men and women in place that have that kind of an attitude. Because sometimes you'll see a man, and just because he's a man, he'll get totally paralyzed by fear, and there might be a woman right there, and she's not. She's able to cope. Sometimes women can cope much better than men with situations like this. But we need the kind of men and women in place that are able to transform that energy into action and be able to keep a cool head so that the actions are not irresponsible as well. You know? So this is a time of crisis that we're heading into. And multiple crises coming from different directions within the entire world's picture or scheme of things. We need to unite the whole world instead of being divided. It's not a time for fighting with each other, one country fighting with each other or whatever. This is a time to unite because we all share a common enemy that we're going to have to fight against. It's time for the world to unite in a united effort. Because there's an old saying, divided you fall, united you stand. Or united we stand, divided we fall. And humanity can accomplish great things if they are not divided, if they are working toward a common goal. And the common goal should be eliminating the humanity's common enemy, so that it'll disappear and the sun will come back again, and we can all have a good times again, if we work together. Listen, thank you guys for listening to this episode. Like and subscribe, give me a thumbs up. We'll catch you guys in the very next show. Probably a market report tomorrow. Bye-bye, guys.